Welcome to Scholastic Scrimmage here on WQLN PBS. Scholastic Scrimmage is brought to you by the members of WQLN and these sponsors. Morris Coupling, a company with a strong commitment to service, manufactures parts for pneumatic conveying and industrial vacuum systems. Supported by a dedicated group of employees, Morris has called Erie home for more than 80 years. When it's time to choose a college, there's a choice recognized worldwide that's close to home. Penn State Barrett offers the resources of a major university with a wide range of undergraduate and graduate degree programs and support for student success. Learn more at barron.psu.edu.
Hello, and welcome to the championship game of the third season of Scholastic Scrimmage here on WQLN PBS. I'm your host, Glenn Holland. The match will have two halves with a lightning round midway through each half. We'll get to know the students a little better at halftime. As a reminder, Scholastic Scrimmage is a game that requires rapid recall of specific factual information and is not indicative of academic training. Pencil and paper ready for your first toss-up. What is the volume of a right circular cone whose height and radius are both 3, given the formula has a 1/3 constant? That is 9 pi. Toss-up. What title character kills Glauce and escapes on a flying chariot in a Euripides play about the end of this woman's marriage to the Greek hero Jason? For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Media.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What musical that features the song Brave Sir Robin appears in a musical based on Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
Camelot.
I'm sorry?
Camelot.
No, it's Spamalot. Toss-up. What former colony, which experienced an exodus of Pied Noir after 1962's Evian Accords, won independence in a brutal war with France? For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Algeria.
That's correct. Here's your bonus. What name was shared by the only two emperors of Brazil, the first of whom declared independence from Portugal in 1822?
Alejandro.
No, their common name was Pedro. Toss-up. What linear triatomic molecule has a solid form known as dry ice? For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Carbon dioxide.
Correct. Here's your bonus. What German Renaissance artist showed a contemplative angel in his engraving Melancholia?
Van Eyck.
No, it was Albrecht Dürer. Toss-up. What king, who was imprisoned at Dürnstein Castle by Leopold V, fought the Third Crusade and for LeBoeuf, Seth.
Richard the Lionheart.
That is correct. Pencil and paper ready for your bonus. What is the volume of a pyramid whose height is 6 and whose square base has sides that each have a length of 7? The volume is 98. Toss-up. What book in which a human boy named Sam Beaver protects a nest full of eggs was written by E.B. White about a bird who plays the title instrument? For LeBoeuf, Isabel.
The Trumpet of the Swan.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What country's 2024 elections, which have been delayed for 9 years, will include President Salva Kiir, who has led it since its 2011 independence?
South Sudan.
That is correct. Toss-up. What river, whose tributaries include the Ubangi, flows past the capital cities of Brazzaville and Kinshasa into... Gerald McLane, Peter.
Congo River.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. What British literary prize awarded in 2022 to The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida expanded eligibility in 2014 to all English language novels?
The Alfred Breiser.
No, it's the Booker Prize. Toss-up. In July 2023, what country led by Ulf Kristersson overcame objections from Turkey to its joining? General McLane, Peter.
Sweden.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What class of fundamental particles includes electrons, muons, and neutrinos, and has a name starting with L?
Leptons.
That is correct. And that is the signal for the beginning of our lightning round. For LeBoeuf, you have first choice on topics. Your choice is the Aeneid or 1990s Britain.
1990s Britain, please.
All right. River that runs past Canary Wharf in London.
The Thames.
Correct. Labour Prime Minister elected in 1997.
Pass.
Iron Lady ousted as Prime Minister in
Margaret
1990.
Thatcher.
Correct. Princess who died in a Paris car crash.
Diana.
Correct. Language given co-equal status with English in Cardiff.
Cornish.
No, that's Welsh. 12-member entity created by the Maastricht Treaty.
Pass.
House of Parliament from which most hereditary peers were removed in 1999.
Lords.
Correct.
House of Lords.
Political unit with a devolved parliament in Edinburgh.
Pass.
Christian holiday when accords for Northern Ireland were signed.
Pass.
English city devastated by an IRA bomb in 1996. That was Manchester. And the Christian holiday was Good Friday. That was the Good Friday Accords for Northern Ireland. General McLane, your topic is the Aeneid. Answer the following about the Aeneid. The language in which it is written.
Pass.
Its author.
Pass.
Its protagonist, Aeneas, is a prince of this city.
Pass.
Its first line is commonly translated as of blank and the man I sing.
Pass.
It begins in this city ruled by Queen Dido.
Pass.
Aeneas reaches the river on whose bank Rome now stands.
Tigris.
I'm sorry?
The Tigris.
The Tiber.
Oh, God.
Sorry. Aeneas' journey is complicated by this goddess, Jupiter's wife.
Hera.
No, it's Juno in the case of Jupiter. Aeneas is reminded of his duty to found a city by this Roman messenger god. That is Mercury. The language it was written in was Latin by a poet named Virgil. And we now return to our regular line of play with this toss-up. What country was forced into the normalization period by Warsaw Pact troops after Alexander Dubček led a reform movement known as the Prague Spring? For LeBoeuf, Liam.
Czechoslovakia.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. French painter Henri Matisse lived near what city on France's Côte d'Azur, which is about 10 miles west of Monaco?
Nice.
That is correct. Here's your toss-up. What artist who organized Dismaland, a parody of Disneyland, created the girl with balloon stencils and is an anonymous English... General McLane, Lena.
Banksy.
That is correct. This is your bonus. Tulip meets the robot 1-1 on a cartoon named for an infinity type of what vehicle, another of which circles the globe on the show Snowpiercer?
Train.
That is correct. Toss-up. What product suddenly appears in 6 stone jars at the start of John chapter 2 during the wedding at Cana? For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Wine.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. What NASA space probe carried an instrument named Ralph, which was used to produce images of Pluto during a 2015 flyby?
New Horizons.
That is correct. Pencil and paper ready for this toss-up. What is the product of 4,000 times 3,000, given that 1,000 thousands is equivalent to a million? For LeBoeuf, Seth.
12 million.
That is correct. Here is your bonus question. Suborning refers to the practice of persuading another person to commit what crime that includes lying under oath?
Perjury.
That is correct. Toss-up. What 2015 film based on an Andy Weir novel is titled for botanist and astronomer Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon, who is stranded on the... For LeBoeuf, Liam.
Is it The Martian?
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What term for a stylized symbol made of intertwined letters is often used for motifs that can be embroidered onto tailored clothing?
A monogram.
That is correct. Toss-up. What woman who was sold into marriage to Saint Charbonneau was a Shoshone interpreter who assisted the... For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Sacagawea.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. The second and fourth quantum numbers for electrons in an atom correspond to the spin and orbital types of what classical quantity? That quantity is angular momentum. Toss-up. What animal with extinct Caspian and Bali species and an endangered Bengal species is... For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Tigers.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. Ella Baker was a strategist for what civil rights organization established by young African American activists in 1960?
The NAACP.
No, it was SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Toss-up. What last name is shared by the singer of I Got You, who is known as the godfather of soul, and an abolitionist who led a raid on Harper's Ferry? For LeBoeuf, Caleb.
Brown.
Correct. Here is your bonus. What alcoholic beverage depicted in namesake paintings by Edgar Degas and Vincent van Gogh was once known as the Green Fairy?
Absinthe.
I'm sorry?
Absinthe.
That is correct. Here's your next toss-up. What opera, whose arias include Che gelida manina, is about... For LeBoeuf, Seth.
La Bohème.
That is correct. Bonus. What groups of shrubs or trees that grow in brackish water help protect parts of Asia's coastline from the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami?
Mangroves.
That is correct. And that is the signal for the end of our first half. The score is General McLane with 50 and Fort LeBoeuf with 240. Let's take a moment to get to know our contestants a little bit better.
My name is Isabel Rogerson. I'm a senior at Fort LeBoeuf High School, and my favorite PBS show was Wild Kratts.
My name is Seth Darnell. I'm a senior at Fort LeBoeuf High School, and my favorite PBS show is Arthur.
My name is Liam McGill. I'm a senior at Fort LeBoeuf High School. My favorite PBS show is Super Y.
My name is Caleb Darnell. I'm a sophomore at Fort LeBoeuf, and my favorite PBS television show is Curious George.
Hello, I'm Peter Roberti, and I'm a senior at General McLane High School. My favorite show from PBS is Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
I'm Owen McMullen. I'm a senior at General McLane, and my favorite PBS show was Wild Kratts.
I'm Lena Buckhammer. I'm a junior at General McLane, and my favorite PBS show was Bob the Builder.
I'm Isabella Williams. I'm a junior at General McLane, and my favorite PBS show is Wild Kratts.
Now we begin our second half with this toss-up question. Here we go. What phenomenon whose far-field type can be explained by Huygens' principle can be caused by an aperture and involves light bending around an object? For LeBoeuf, Seth.
Refraction.
I'm sorry?
Refraction.
No, General McLane?
Reflection.
Diffraction is the answer. Toss-up. What driver of the number 22 car, co-sponsored by Pennzoil, is the youngest man to win a Sprint Cup race and won the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series championship? That is Joey Logano. Toss-up. What solid material forms when updrafts and downdrafts in clouds cause cycles of refreezing and can occur? Fort LeBoeuf, Liam.
Hail.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What saxophonist who recorded Ornithology with Benny Harris pioneered bebop and was nicknamed Bird?
Ellington.
No, that was Charlie Parker. Toss-up. What country, where 2 pilots died when a fire extinguishing plane crashed into Evia, was the site of 2023 wildflowers in Corfu? Fort LeBoeuf, Liam.
Greece.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What country, which is home to the Izalco volcano, is west of the Gulf of Fonseca and southwest of Honduras?
Chile.
No, that country is El Salvador. Toss-up. What author of the dystopian science fiction novels Clara and the Sun and Never Let Me Go is a 2017 Nobel laureate who moved to Britain from Japan? That is Kazuo Ishiguro. Toss-up. What creatures whose kings rule over the 4 seas surrounding China's are auspicious beings honored in a boat festival and resemble serpents? Fort LeBoeuf, Seth.
Dragons.
Correct. Here is your bonus. The 2023 Major League Baseball Home Run Derby was won by what first baseman and designated hitter for the Toronto Blue Jays, whose father was a Hall of Fame outfielder? That is Vladimir Guerrero. Toss-up. What battles whose victors were commanded by Euripides of Sparta and Themistocles was a major naval victory for the Greeks over Persia in 480 BC? General McLane, Peter.
Battle of Thermopylae?
No. Sorry, Fort LeBoeuf. That's the Battle of Salamis. Toss-up. What tiny objects, which act as particles based on their vibration, lend their name to a theory of everything and are named for their rope-like form? Those tiny objects are strings. And that sound means it's time for our lightning round. General McLane, you have first choice of topics this time. Your choices are foreign language names or tens.
We'll take foreign language names, please.
All right. Given a language's name for itself, such as le français, give the English name of that language, such as French. Español.
Spanish.
Russian.
Russian.
Nederlands.
Dutch.
El Arabia.
Arabic.
Nihongo.
Pass.
Magyar.
Pass.
Norsk.
Norwegian.
Correct. Guanha.
Pass.
Elenika.
Pass.
Ivrit.
Pass.
Pass.
Nihongo.
Pass.
Magyar.
Pass.
Guanha.
Cantonese.
No, it's Mandarin, actually. Elenika. That's Greek. And now I can officially speak all of those languages. All right, Fort LeBoeuf, your lightning round is on the topic tens. Answer the following about the number 10. 10th month of the Gregorian calendar.
October?
Correct. Founding father depicted on the $10 bill.
Hamilton.
Correct. A period of 10 years.
Decade.
Correct. Either Old Testament book that lists the 10 Commandments.
Deuteronomy.
Correct. Type of number that includes 10, 15, and 21.
Composite.
No, triangular number. Street whose number 10 is home to the British Prime Minister.
Downing Street.
Correct. 10th president whose name followed Tippecanoe in a slogan.
Tyler.
Correct. Decapods, like shrimp, belong to this phylum.
Crustacea.
No, Arthropoda. A country with a 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period.
China.
Correct. Noble gas whose atomic number is 10.
Argon.
No, it's neon. And now it is back to regular play for us. So, here's your toss-up. Buzzers ready. What project led by General Leslie Groves was based at the Oak Ridge Laboratory and Fort LeBoeuf, Caleb.
The Manhattan Project.
Correct. Here's your bonus. What term, named for a mythical youth whose body was forcibly joined with that of the nymph Salmacis, describes a being with both male and female organs?
Hermaphrodite.
That's correct. The young man was hermaphroditus. Here's your toss-up. What 1824 musical work, sometimes nicknamed choral, has a fourth movement celebrating a universal brotherhood using Friedrich Schiller's Ode to Joy? Fort LeBoeuf, Seth.
Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Correct. Here's your bonus. In 2023, Hyun Tok Kim et al. Claimed to discover a material that has what property at room temperature, enabling it to expel external magnetic fields?
Superconductivity.
That's correct. And of course, within weeks, it turned out it was not a superconductor, but there you go. Toss-up. What state, which is nicknamed the last best place, contains Glacier National Park and the Little Bighorn Battlefield site and is led from Helena? Fort LeBoeuf, Seth.
Montana.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What analytical technique is a qualitative form of emission spectroscopy that yields a carmine red output for lithium?
Chromoscopy.
No, that is the flame test. That's what I was looking for. Toss-up. For hyperbola what points have a tangent parallel to the conjugate axis, are a semi-major axis away from the center, and are the tips of branches? Those points are vertices. Toss-up. What senator who led negotiations with Joe Manchin to pass the Inflation Reduction Act is from New York and is the Senate Majority Leader? Gerald McLane. Peter.
Chuck Schumer.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What first name was shared by a 20th century confessional poet surnamed Sexton and by the youngest Bronte sister who wrote the novel Agnes Grey?
Lloyd.
No, it's Anne Sexton and Anne Bronte. Toss-up. What city, whose Azadi Tower was built during the Pahlavi dynasty to celebrate the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire, is the capital of Iran? Fort LeBoeuf, Liam.
Tehran.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. In 2023, a jury ruled that a document found in a couch was the legitimate will of what soul singer of I Say a Little Prayer and Respect? Seth?
Aretha Franklin.
That's correct. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Tell me what it means to me. Toss-up. What man outlined his opposition to the provisional government in the April Theses and led the Bolsheviks in the October? General McLane, Peter.
Vladimir Lenin.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. Sails inspired the roof of what performing arts building designed by Jorn Utzon in the capital, New South Wales?
The Sydney Opera House.
That is correct. Toss-up. What singer who declares, I can't lose when I'm with you in the song Snooze admits, I might kill my ex, not the best idea, in her 2023 song Kill Bill? Joe McLean, Peter.
Lizzo.
No. Fort LeBoeuf. That's SZA, known by the initials SZA. And that is the conclusion of our contest. Congratulations to both teams for an excellent final matchup. General McLean, your score was 120. Well done. At second place, you have earned your school a $2,000 scholarship. Congratulations to Fort LeBoeuf. With 405, you have won your school a $4,000 scholarship, along with a very nice trophy for bragging rights. You'll also be moving on to compete in the Scholastic Scrimmage statewide competition. I'm your host, Glenn Holland. Thank you for being with us.